It's been said God never fails his students, but he does allow us to take the tests over and over again. I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of tests in my life that I've had to take over and over again. And it's by God's grace, by his love, and by what he's done in Jesus that I've been able to move forward from his healing in my life. So this is verse 11. Here's how Moses is raised. It says this: One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. So Moses goes out one day after he's grown up, and he witnesses this scene of brutality, this Egyptian beating a Hebrew. We don't know if Moses has seen something like this several times before. It seems, according to this, that Moses has some acknowledgement of who he is. He knows he's been raised in Pharaoh's household, but he knows he's not an Egyptian, that he is a Hebrew. He says here his own people, so he identifies with the nation of Israel. And there's something that happens right here that's going to change things for Moses. In fact, it becomes a pivotal moment for him moving forward. He's going to take some action right now. And I want to point out something that is interesting. Moses sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. That word beating is going to be repeated 2 other times in the next 2 verses, but it's going to be translated in a different way. It's the same Hebrew verb, beating. I'm reading it from the NIV. It's going to translate it as killed in fighting, but it's the same root word. So look how this plays out. This is verse 12. It says, looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. Killed the Egyptian, hid him in the sand. Verse 13, the next day, he went out and he saw 2 Hebrews fighting. So here we have that word used again, beating, killed, fighting. He asked him a question. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? And the man said, who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, what I did must have become known. I mean, Moses sees this mistreatment happening of his fellow Hebrew, and he intervenes. Now, there's some space in the text here where we might wrestle a little bit with how to interpret such a scene. I mean, is Moses wrong because he stops this beating from happening? I mean, it looks like he just intervenes. He's trying to stop this cruel treatment. Like any of us might do if we witness somebody beating someone else, maybe you would step up and you're like, hey, I'm going to stop that from happening. There's a little space here. Was Moses really trying to kill this Egyptian, or was he maybe just trying to stop him and he accidentally gave him a fatal blow? Or is Moses trying to right a wrong by committing another wrong? There's some space there with how we might read that. But what is absolutely true is this little moment becomes pivotal for Moses and his future journey. And it's going to expose some things about Moses that are going to be a little painful. And it's going to lead him on a journey of encountering God. Now, we might be tempted to move really quickly through this moment here, but I want to just stay in it for a second. And I want to look back at verse 12 here. Verse 12 says that looking this way and that way and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and he hid him in the sand. I've always found the imagery of this moment really fascinating. Moses is there, and he looks around to see if anyone is watching him, and then he decides to attack and to kill the Egyptian. And what he does is he buries him in the sands. Now, admittedly, I'm not much of a prop preacher, okay, but I do have a prop today. All right, this is fun. This is the Egyptian. Here he is, okay? You can see that. And Moses sees this treatment that's happening. He attacks him. He kills him. And then it says that he buries him in the sand. He just puts the sand over him, buries him there, and then leaves. Now you have to ask yourself, why did he bury the body? Why did he hide this Egyptian? Surely the prince of Egypt, if he would have gone to Pharaoh and said, hey, you know what? I lost my temper, I lost my cool, I overreacted, and I accidentally did this thing. I'm guilty, I did it, but this is what happens. You'd imagine the Pharaoh would probably say, okay, well, normally you're in jail or you're going to get executed, but okay, you told me, all right, that's fine, okay, we'll deal with it. What Moses does is he hides what he did. He buries it. It could be that there's some tension that exists in this household of Pharaoh at this point in time, and Moses knows that he's a Hebrew. Maybe Pharaoh obviously knows that too, and he's like, hey, I have this foreigner living in my house, and I don't want him there. My daughter brought him home. I mean, I'm not running, an orphanage here. Why is he taking up space in the palace? There's some tension there. In fact, we are told that the Pharaoh finds out, and he's angry, and he wants to kill Moses. So, okay, maybe there's something going on there. But Moses' first instinct is to make sure the coast is clear, and then he buries the Egyptian. In a lot of ways, that's human nature, isn't it? Like, we all do that. We hide. We bury. The very first story in the Bible about Adam and Eve, when sin comes into the world, Adam and Eve, the first response they have is they hide. They hide from God. Shame comes to them, and they want to keep their distance from God. And when we think about all of our lives, there's a lot of layers to this, but don't we spend time hiding and suppressing and burying a lot of things? I mean, maybe we bury struggles, and we don't want people to know about them, and so we push them down deep, try to hide them. Maybe there's regrets that we have in our lives. Things we've done, and we've moved on, but it's hanging on there, and so we're like, no, I gotta push it down in the sand. I gotta bury it. Maybe we have some pain that we're holding on to, some resentment, could be some trauma, and perhaps we tried to work through that, but we know that it's still in there, and it's scary, and it's uncomfortable when it starts to rise up in us. And so naturally, the tendency is we want to bury it, we want to push it down, because we think, I don't want anyone to know that about me. If they knew that, they'd judge me. If they understood that part of me, they would reject me. Or maybe if we're honest, we'd say, I got some sin I'm struggling with in my life. Some things that, it keeps coming up, and I've tried my best to rid myself of it, but it's there, and so I keep pushing it down farther and farther. But I think all of us know that buried things have a way of coming to the surface, which is exactly what happens to Moses. It says that Moses, he does this act, he buries the Egyptian, and then the next day, Moses sees two of his own people fighting, and he tries to intervene. Is this the moment where Moses feels like he's the leader now? Okay, hey, I've grown up in Pharaoh's household. I get it. I've lived in two worlds. I've been a part of the privilege and part of the power, and now I see my people, and they have powerlessness, and they have poverty, and now it's time for me to do something and step up and lead them. And so he tries to do that, and he's exposed. And they say to him, what are you going to do? Kill us just like you did that Egyptian? Moses receives this blow, and he runs. He gets out of town. In fact, this is verse 15. It says, when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh, and he went to live in Midian. This is the turning point in his story of how he's raised. He gets out of town. He gets out of Dodge. He goes to the far country. He flees to the Badlands. He goes to live in the boondocks, or as the Bible calls it, the wilderness. He goes to be in the wilderness. And what's going to happen in Moses' life is he's going to spend some time working through a lot of stuff that he's been burying. And it's going to come up. But he's going to be met with God. He's going to be met with a God who knows him, who has an assignment for him, a God who is not surprised by any of these things in Moses' life, but a God who actually loves him. And that encounter that he will have is going to change everything. See, God invites us to be people that dig up the stuff because that's where his greatest work happens. That's where healing comes into our lives. Moses escapes, but this moment ends up being hugely important for him because what he does as he leaves Egypt is he goes to face himself. A big part of growing up in our lives is when we learn to face ourselves. When we come to a place where we can be honest about the journey we've had and where we are, warts and all. And that's what happens to Moses. You know, I've always been a fan of music, and I have kind of an eclectic taste in music, to be honest with you. And over the years, different albums have spoken to my life, different artists in powerful ways. And there's an artist that I followed for many years, and I like a lot of his music, not all of it, okay? And depending on your own musical sensibilities, you might say, yeah, I like this person, or you're going to boo. I don't know what that would be. But his name is John Mayer, and okay, all right, yeah, okay. I couldn't tell, or sort of indifferent, that's fine. And John Mayer came out with an album years ago. It was called Born and Raised. And in this album, he described the journey of growing up and the many things that he was learning along the way. Now, I don't put this up here because John Mayer is some kind of exemplary moral example at all, okay? It's not that. But the music, the songs on this album were all about when you come to that point where you realize you've been born and raised, when you're making your way into adulthood, when you're able to look back at yourself and you see the parts of your story that weren't so neat and tidy, but you can face them now with a different perspective. And I found this album to be really moving because it reminded me of the journey that we're all on as people. That we can't run from ourselves. You can do that for a while, but true growth in our lives is going to happen when we learn to face ourselves and be honest about where we are. Moses, he's going to flee to Midian. He, in his mind, he's getting away from the problem. He's trying to put it behind him, but actually he's going to the place where he's going to deal with it head on. And that's going to be the moment of his greatest growth. And the same thing, by the way, is true for us. That when you can face yourself, that is an important part of the spiritual journey, and it's where freedom begins. See, there's two ways that we can deal with the different dynamics in our lives that we bury. Whether that's stuff from our past, whether that's our struggles, whether that's just the things that we don't want people to know about. There's two ways that those things often get dealt with in our lives. And the first way is what happened to Moses, where it gets exposed. He thinks no one saw what happened, and then they see it. He gets called out, and so he now has to face it. It gets unearthed because it's not a secret. And that's painful. It ends up being painful for Moses, and the truth is, he's not a perfect person. He never will be a perfect person, but there's a lot of things that are underneath that he has to deal with. His anger, his own sense of righteousness, some of his own sin. These are all going to be things that come up that he will begin to face. So one way is when something gets unburied for us, it gets brought to the surface. And that's painful. But that pain can be a part of our healing journey. Here's the next way, though. The next way is when we dig it up ourselves. When we begin to do the work of being honest and we aren't afraid to dive down deep and to bring those things up. The Bible calls that confession and repentance. And those are staples on the spiritual journey of being able to say, God, this is really what's going on right now. This is where I am. These are the things that have my mind and my heart. This is the place where I fell short, and we are able to take those and fall before a heavenly Father who sees us, who knows us, and who loves us. And here's the thing, both of those examples, both those ways that we dig things up in our lives, they both have pain. But that pain has the potential to lead to healing. And you have to hear this. We have a God who is not looking to have us dig up those things and be honest about those things because he's trying to punish us, but rather because he wants to make us whole and he wants to heal us. We don't have a God who is punitive, but a God who is restorative. And the story of the Bible is a God that sent his son for us. That Exodus is actually foreshadowing, it's pointing ahead to the good news of Jesus. In and through him, new life and redemption. A God that is with us and knows us and loves us. And he invites us on this journey of getting to know him and being changed along the way. It's been said God never fails his students, but he does allow us to take the tests over and over again. I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of tests in my life that I've had to take over and over again. And it's by God's grace, by his love, and by what he's done in Jesus that I've been able to move forward from his healing in my life